Cover this one too. Thanks, David, for giving me some material. I'm going to cover this one too because I'm so sick to death of the Republican parties, their politicians, trying to say that we have to deal with mental health, which, by the way, they don't want to fund, right? They don't even want to fund mental health programs. But the reality is, I just watched one of these JCS videos last week about the Parkland shooter. And about how they determined that he was not criminally insane through his witness interview. His interrogation, right? They keep trying to blame this on mental health, when in fact, a lot of the times we're talking about people who knew exactly what they were doing, and they had some level of personality disorder, where they could make clear judgments and chose not to. It's not the same. Let's go.
If people want a quick solution, the long-term solution here is to address the mental health issue.
And I hear our governor talking about mental health issues. We're always going to have mental health issues, but if we don't do something about the guns, the people killing guns, then we're going to continue to have the same thing happen.
A first responder on scene to the Allen, Texas outlet mall shooting is rejecting Governor Abbott's excuses for why there can't be more done about gun laws. So I'm going to get to several videos in this segment. I'm also going to break down yet another mass shooting. And while I'm not going to name names because I don't care to publicize the individuals that are behind this, I do want to give you some context about who this person is, what's in their background, the kind of views they espoused, because it helps to inform a lot of this and what's, been going on just generally. But first here, actually, before I even get to breaking down what happened in this shooting, the reason why I cover, even though as much as I hate covering these stories, and I often don't cover them, there's a lot of them I don't cover.
Yeah.
I feel like because I am a Canadian, I can offer a bit of a different perspective than your typical, American news commentator, because we don't have this problem. Canada has issues, not perfect, but this issue we do not have, and we are right next door.
Yeah.
So any excuses around,
I don't think Mexico has it either, David. You might want to point that out as well. I don't think Mexico has a lot of mass shootings in schools and public places, post offices, government facilities. I don't think they're having that either. They have their own gang violence because they've got a drug network going on, but it's not the same thing. And you do have to, if you're going to address issues, you do have to isolate them and be like, okay, how do we solve this particular issue, right? Let's go.
Just the mental health. You don't think other countries have mental health issues? Oh, it's the culture, it's movies and video games.
Right.
You don't think Canadians, Europeans play shooting games, watch action movies?
Right.
The issue is the guns. The issue is a total lack of gun regulation.
Yep.
That's the problem. So...
And by the way, our neighboring countries, they're able to cross the border and buy guns too, because it's so lax about how you can purchase guns in America that they can get them too. Which is one of the reasons that Republicans like to conflate these issues, despite the fact that these people are crossing the border to actually get guns in America.
Let me first break down the story. As with CNN here, since I'm not going to read too much about this, but here are their points. 8 people were killed and at least 7 others wounded when a gunman opened fire at Allen, Texas outlet mall on Saturday. The shooter, who was killed by police outside the mall, has been identified as a 33-year-old man. The gunman was armed with an AR-15 style rifle. According to the source, investigators are looking into his potential extremist ties, which I'll get to more on in a second here. And the victims in the attack range in age from 5 to 61 years old.
Wow.
All right. And several more remain in hospital. Okay.
Wow.
I first want to show you this video here. So this is you're going to see an account from Steven Spainhauser. He was one of the first people that arrived there. He was there before the cops were there. His son works in one of the shops in the mall. And here's what he had to say about his experience.
First girl I walked up to was crouched down, covering her head in the bushes. So I felt for her pulse, pulled her head to the side, and she had no face.
But Spainhour says he
God.
found a child that survived, while covered by his protective mother who died.
And so when I rolled the mother over, he came out, and I asked him, "Are you okay?" And he said, "My mom is hurt. My mom's hurt." So rather than traumatize him anymore, I put him around the corner, set him down. He was covered from head to toe like somebody had poured blood on him.
It's that awful image that Spainhour and others who witnessed the horror will be haunted by for the rest of their lives.
Because no one can see what they saw today and not be affected by it. It's not a situation that I would wish upon anybody, JD. It's just unfathomable.
Folks, will you help me start my campaign?
I have a hard time even reading about this, hearing about these firsthand accounts. Can you imagine actually being in that situation? Can you imagine seeing what these people saw? I think oftentimes that's missed in these discussions around these shootings. It's not just about the victims. It's also about the impact on everybody involved. Whether you were injured, whether you're a family member of someone who was a victim, whether you were there yourself, whether you're responding to it and seeing all the carnage. This is the kind of experience that has a severe impact on people's mental health. Just someone being around the situation, let alone being actually in it. And still, this happens again.
I was divorced in 95. My father-in-law at the time, my ex-father-in-law, was the postmaster of Dana Point when there was a mass shooting in that postal office back in I wasn't married yet. We were just dating at the time. But this happened, I want to say it happened in like 92. They were put into hiding. And his father, my ex-husband's father, was removed from his position and put in a position where he had to send termination letters to people getting fired from the post office all over the place. He ultimately moved out to I don't know if he's still alive or not. Like I'm not still in touch with him. He ultimately moved out to Henderson, which is right next door to like Las Vegas. His wife died, and so he I don't know if they were married, but he was in a new relationship. I don't know if it was like they got married or whatnot happened there. She was a first responder. She was a paramedic, and she had to respond to the victims of the Vegas shooting. When I had people like Lauren Steiner calling me up and telling me it was a false flag event, and his wife was treating the gun victims. It's really sad to watch Americans get so fucked up in the head that they can't even believe what really happened in these situations. It's like really fucking messed up. When I'm sure, okay, so I'm 49 now. I'm sure a lot of you have had these sort of instances where you're actually close enough to a situation where you realize it was real, and yet you have like these MAGA Republicans around you telling you, nope, it was a false flag. It didn't really happen. Okay. All right. It didn't really happen, and therefore we're going to still sell military grade weapons to civilians, right? This is how we're going to do.
and again and again. I'm not even sure how many mass shootings there were this year. It's impossible to follow at this point, but it's a regular occurrence. It's now a normal thing that happens.
Oh my God.
Only in America, by the way.
Yeah.
Now, more on Spainhauer. So his son was sheltered inside H&M. That's where his son worked. He says here, quote, "My son came out, and I want to tell you, to see your son come out with his hands over his head and have to walk past dead bodies, it's not something any parent or anybody should ever have to see or experience." He is now joining a growing chorus of people touched by gun violence across the country who are calling for meaningful gun control legislation. And I'm going to get to more from him in a bit here after I get to the Greg Abbott video. But a bit more on the shooter behind this, because this is also an important piece. He was wearing a tactical vest and also had a handgun. One of the senior law enforcement officials said more weapons and ammunition were found in his car. At the time of the massacre, he was wearing a patch on his chest that included the acronym RWDS. According to two senior law enforcement officials, authorities believe the letters stand for Right Wing Death Squad, a phrase used in far-right online spaces, one of the senior law enforcement officials said. So,
I mean, here's the thing. It's the militarization of the police. There were two main things that happened in the 90s in California, in Southern California specifically. One of them was the North Hollywood shootout, in which we had some bank robbers put on full body gear, so they were able to sustain a lot of bullets without being taken down. The police were like out there going to gun shops trying to ammo up because they didn't have the kind of weapons that could actually take these criminals down who were shooting at them. The other one is the LA riots, where they stupidly decided to let the situation just fucking brew for 3 days before they brought in the National Guard. So businesses, small businesses in a very impoverished neighborhoods were getting burned up. And that was devastating for like a decade at least for those neighborhoods in central and south central LA. They learned their lesson though, because when they started having Black Lives Matters protests, they did it in the richer parts of LA rather than attacking their own neighborhood. So kudos to you on that. But obviously devastation and destruction is not the way to actually achieve any sort of forward-moving legislation. It's not going to happen that way. Making some sort of stand, like, what do you think? Your name's going to go down in history for doing something like that? Hang on, I'm going to pull up the other one.
Jared Murray was found not guilty by reason of insanity. He was committed to a high-security mental facility where he is to remain indefinitely.
Anything to say for yourself today?
No, ma'am.
Any reason why you might have done this young man?
No, ma'am.
No reason.
No, ma'am.
You have nothing to say for yourself.
No, ma'am.
You want to tell the community anything?
No, ma'am.
Did you confess to police?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you proud of what you've done?
No, ma'am.
Do you have remorse for what you've done?
No, ma'am.
He appears completely void of human emotion. No regret, remorse, shame, nor fear. He had both taken a life and destroyed his own, yet seems indifferent to the circumstances. With respect to his interrogation footage, the most conspicuous element was the complete lack of self-preservation. He didn't once attempt to deflect blame, nor afford himself any type of justification for his actions. He simply spoke in a factual, non-biased manner, impartial to how his words may have been taken or even twisted to be used against him. There was no calculated structure to his behavior whatsoever. So with this notion in mind, let's move on to the primary subject of this video.
Yeah, seriously, Republicans, you gotta stop using the mental health excuse, because these interrogators can tell. And if they don't have the actual justification to be held for criminal insanity, which this gets discussed a little bit earlier in the video, that it's not a better situation for them. They actually will have longer sentences if they are determined criminally insane, because they'll be locked up in institutions where they'll be held for much longer times than a normal sentence, just for the horrible things that they did to begin with. But because they're determined criminally insane, they are determined beyond repair. They cannot be reformed at that point. And so, say they get 25 to life or something like that, and potentially there's like an opportunity to get off for good behavior. Maybe they find God, maybe they, earn a degree, they get their GED, they get a bachelor's, whatever it is, while they're in prison trying to reform themselves. That is not an option for people who are determined criminally insane. But you want to say that all these people who pick up guns and act on rage, that they're all insane. They're not. Some of them are just have personality disorders, or they're, which is not considered insane. You can still use rational judgment in that circumstance. Or they acted out of rage in that moment. It was like a crime of passion. Oh my God, this guy picked on me at school, right? I'm so mad at my boss. Whatever it is. But those are not considered criminally insane actions. Those are considered awful, obviously. These are not, great people. But they could have used rational decision. And that's what the courts decide, is whether or not they were acting rationally based on their own capacities. The guy that they just gave you the example of showed that he was incapable of even protecting himself during the interrogation.
Go there a minute, have a seat in the floor chair, all right? Pull your pants up a little bit. Have a seat.
This is the Parkland shooter, you guys. This is the one that came and shot up kids in Florida. This is the Parkland shooter.
Did you pee up? No, do not think about getting up, right, buddy?
This is 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, who 3 hours and 55 minutes prior to this moment murdered 17 people at his former high school in Parkland, Florida. Among the dead were 3 teachers and 14 students, the majority of whom were 14 years old. A further 17 students were seriously wounded during the massacre. The gunman dropped his rifle 7 minutes into the rampage and then blended in with the crowd as he ran out of the building. He was at large for 1 hour and 20 minutes, during which time he stopped off at a Subway and then a McDonald's, where he sat down and casually spoke to one of the victim's brothers. The student was unaware that his older sister had just been shot through the chest by the man sitting across the table. The description of the shooter was transmitted by police over the radio, which led to an officer identifying and arresting him on a street just 2 miles away from the school. He was taken to the nearest hospital and examined by a doctor for roughly 1 hour and 45 minutes. He was medically cleared and then transferred to the local sheriff's office, where he was subjected to interrogation.
No, do not think about getting up, right, buddy?
From the moment the subject entered the room, his eyes have been fixed upon nothing but the floor. He's held on to this downward-facing gaze as if he's either in a state of shock or disconnected from the moment. At the exact moment the door shuts, he lifts up his head to observe his surroundings. His behavior completely shifts once he believes no one is watching. If we look at his demeanor a moment earlier, we can see the contrast. He went from being detached to alert. His behavior changed as the environment changed, which is a recurring theme throughout this interrogation. It shows us that his mind isn't wandering off during these moments of apparent disconnection. He is in fact fully present and very aware of what's going on around him. As he looks up, his eyes immediately lock onto the camera. He now knows he is still being watched, and his following gestures will resemble that of someone with suicidal tendencies.
Not exactly, though, right?
At face value, these externalized suicidal thoughts may seem genuine to some, but when framed with the rest of his behavior throughout this interrogation, they are exposed for what they really are: an act, a calculated attempt to garner sympathy and paint his character in what he believes to be a more positive light.
All right. How you doing, Nick? You all right? Gotta be able to speak so I can hear you. All right, I just need to ask you really your name and date of birth just to confirm I got it right, and then I'm going to see if you want a glass of water or something. What's your first name?
This is a situation where the proof against the suspect is already conclusive. He is without question responsible for the crimes under investigation, making the pursuit of a confession not essential. The police know he did it, but they need to know why he did it, which would already require a complex strategy in order to obtain the correct information. But the suspect's first recorded statements upon his arrest have now made the procedure considerably more difficult.
What's going on today, bro?
The demons, man.
Demons?
Voices.
Yeah, no problem. Voices and demons?
Where's the voices? What happened?
Shut up. Just be quiet, man. Shut up.
Demons, man. Voices.
These two words have now forged the primary stratagem of his own interrogation, which is to cut through deception under the guise of supportive examination. The questions will be designed to lock him into a specific narrative about his alleged psychosis, while simultaneously giving him the impression that his responses are for his own benefit. Anything he says now can be used to refute any amendments he might come up with at a later stage. We all know that after this interrogation, he will have significantly more time to think, study, and even seek guidance from professionals about how the legal system interconnects with mental illness. Yet the majority of this forthcoming knowledge could be useless to him depending on what he says during these moments. The more details he gives away, the less options he will have for his defense later on. But
Okay, let's pause there and go back to David's video.
So, this is also part of the pattern of behavior we are seeing in a lot of these shootings in terms of their political views. But also, it's also important to point out, this is not just an issue in the U.S. This is an issue globally. These people exist all over the world. Yet, they don't have easy access to firearms. They don't have easy access to a tactical vest. That's an American problem. A preliminary review of what is believed to be the shooter's social media accounts reveal hundreds of posts that include racially or ethnically motivated violent extremist rhetoric, including neo-Nazi material and material espousing white supremacy, two senior law enforcement officials said. All right. Now, let's get to Greg Abbott.
Abbott has expanded gun rights. He signed open carry legislation. He's allowed for weapons to be carried on college campuses and in places of worship. He's issued executive orders bolstering and encouraging the reporting of potential threats. And in 2020, Abbott signed a law that allows Texans to carry handguns without a license or training as long as they aren't otherwise prohibited from carrying a gun.
So, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has only made it easier to acquire a firearm in a state that already has a real issue with mass shootings.
Yep.
Let me get to what Greg Abbott is saying now on Fox News Sunday, where he is responding to the popularity of gun reforms, including with Republicans. So I'm going to pause throughout this since there is a couple of things that, of course, he is lying through his teeth about, but here it is.
One state senator
pointing the finger at you and the GOP there in Texas, saying there are loose and dangerous gun laws. I want to put up a poll that we just had on possible gun reforms here in the U.S. This is just out from Fox News. When you ask people what they would favor, background checks for guns, enforcing existing gun laws, legal age to 21, requiring mental health checks, flagging people for danger to self, all of those score at more than 80%. Are there things that you would consider in Texas or that you think Congress should consider at a federal level along those lines?
Well, on the federal level, as you know, some laws were passed last year to begin to address this. At the state level, listen, this is something that we've been grappling with over the past year.
I should just note that the gun laws that were passed last year were widely criticized by people that want to see proper gun reforms. So it's not anywhere close to what is necessary in order to, help stop the frequent occurrence of these sorts of events.
And there are some potential easy solutions, such as passing laws that we're working on right now to get guns out of the hands of dangerous criminals and to increase penalties for criminals who possess guns. But Shannon, we need to recognize a reality. What we've seen across the United States over the past year or two, and that is an increased number of shootings in both red states and blue states.
Which, before it goes on, that's the perfect argument for federal gun laws, to do something on a national scale as opposed to doing this state by state. If there's shootings rising across the country, then it can't just be about what individual states are doing. Yet people like Abbott always argue for states' rights.
Shannon, we've seen an increased number of shootings in states with easy gun laws as well as states with very strict gun laws. I think that the state in which the largest number of victims have occurred this year is in California, where they have very tough gun laws where 11 people died. Okay,
this is so absurd.
Yeah.
These are the same people. Abbott, I think even in this interview, talks about how this it's all getting so political. He is the one being political here by cherry picking an individual stat from 2023 as opposed to looking at the overall picture of states with terrible gun laws versus states with more restrictive gun laws, even though no state even comes close to what is necessary, because again, there needs to be national laws around this stuff. But this idea that somehow California is worse than Texas is so ridiculous and a bold-faced lie. Here is CNN with reporting a study here. States with weaker gun laws have higher rates of firearm-related homicides and suicides, study finds. So they go on to write here, a study published in January by a leading nonprofit organization that focuses on gun violence prevention found that there is a direct correlation in states with weaker gun laws and higher rates of gun deaths, including homicides, suicides, and accidental killings. The study by Every Town for Gun Safety determined that California had the strongest gun laws in the country. Hawaii topped the list with the lowest rate of gun deaths in the country, while Mississippi led the country with both the weakest gun laws and highest rate of gun deaths. There is a direct correlation here. Now, if you want to go deeper into this, you can. Here is their study. They rank all the states here. I will link to this below the video on YouTube under sources in the description box. Let's hear a little more from Abbott and where he puts the blame for these kinds of shootings.
One thing that we can observe very easily, and that is there has been a dramatic increase in the amount of anger and violence that's taking place in America. And what Texas is doing in a big-time way, we are working to address that anger and violence by going to its root cause, which is addressing the mental health problems behind it. We know that Texas had been lagging in addressing mental health for years, and that's why over the past 3 sessions, we've added almost $25 billion to address mental health. We're in the waning days of a session right now where we will be adding even more funding, about $3 billion, to address mental health needs in the state of Texas, especially in rural Texas, and especially for children in schools.
All right, so...
No, wait, hold up. Let's go back to the other video. Hang on.
More details he gives away, the less options he will have for his defense later on. But pursuing this objective is complicated, as there are 2 very common scenarios for when this type of suspect gets interrogated. And just to be entirely clear, By this type of suspect, we mean someone who is 1, pretending to be insane, and 2, not fooling anyone. Their most common response is to simply shut down. They regress into total silence or some type of catatonic state, and the interrogation never gets off the ground. The other common response is the exact opposite. They erupt into hysteria or supposed delirium, and everything from that point forward becomes incoherent. The lead detective, John Curcio, must not allow either of these scenarios to transpire, and this makes the first 2 minutes absolutely crucial. He needs to create a positive first impression and resemble the furthest thing from a threat, while at the same time maintain a presence of authority. His temperament will be easygoing and non-confrontational, but also encouraging when extracting a response. His role at this moment is the ally. He needs to be liked, respected, but must not be feared. Not yet anyway. Going off the suspect's initial demeanor, the detective will know that he is far more likely to regress into a state of silence at this opening stage. And if he can prevent that from happening within the first 2 minutes, he is over the first obstacle.
All right. How you doing, Nick? I just need to ask you really your name and date of birth just to confirm I got it right, and then I'm going to see if you want a glass of water or something. What's your first name? Come on, Nick. Huh? Spell it for me.
Okay.
Come on, I'm old. You got to talk so I can hear you. N-I-K. O.
L.
Okay. A-S. And what's your middle name? Come on, man, speak so I can hear you.
Jacob.
Jacob. J-A-C. What's your date of birth? Okay, you need to relax, because I'm the last detective or policeman you're going to have to talk to. So right off the bat, that should be somewhat comforting to you to know that I'm the last guy you got to talk to. But the thing about it is, look at me. I got to be able to hear you. Okay? So all I want to do is get basic information from you, and then we'll get into the, whether you want a glass of water, all that stuff. What's your date of birth?
09.
January?
09.
09 September.
The investigation team already know the answers to these basic questions. Their only purpose are to initiate a response, and their non-threatening nature make it more likely for the suspect to engage. They are essentially the opening wedge to get the two-way dialogue flowing. And although the suspect is still partially committed to his catatonic state, as we can clearly see, he is still responsive, making it unlikely for him to regress into complete silence from this point forward. Everything up to this moment has gone to plan. The detective has one foot in the door, and he can now develop the relationship from a more secure position. He goes about this with a standard method of rapport development, the offer of food and water.
All right, let me do this. You want a cold water? You don't know if you want cold water? Thank you. I'm going to bring in 2, because I want one that was hot. And then if you decide you want to have it, that's fine. You sure you don't want something to eat? Okay.
The refusal to accept food and water is a familiar response which you may have already seen on this channel. It's a glaring manifestation of shame. This is not to be confused with guilt nor remorse, both of which require the acceptance of responsibility, which in turn directs our focus outwards on the feelings of others. Shame, on the other hand, shifts our focus on the perceptions of others towards ourselves. The subject is afraid of how it will look if he accepts the offer considering the circumstances. He instead wants to appear as if he's so negatively affected by the events that he's unconcerned with meeting his basic needs.
Of course, I have so many different keys. All right, I'll be right back.
He knows he's being watched.
Once again, his demeanor abruptly switches when the detective leaves the room. With his head buried in his hands, it's anyone's guess as to what is going through his mind at this moment. But what you are about to see next is extremely revealing. Cruz was a left-handed shooter. The surveillance at the school would confirm this, and if you pay close attention to the movements of his hands in the next moments, although very subtle, you can see that he's reimagining holding his weapon. But what's more telling is how his demeanor abruptly stops and then completely switches right before he looks in the direction of the camera. He goes from holding a rifle and beginning to smirk to then pretending to cry and reverting back to his suicidal mannerisms. This all occurs in under 4 seconds. It could be assumed that for a brief moment, he was not only recollecting the attack, but gaining gratification from doing so. He then remembered he was on film, giving reason for the sharp adjustment. His true self was reliving the attack and enjoying his work, while his false self was so dejected to the point he was externalizing suicidal thoughts. Complete opposites.
Okay, let's go back to David.
So, this is also part of the pattern of behavior we are seeing in a lot of these shootings, in terms of their political views. But also, it's also important to point out, this is not just an issue in the U.S. This is an issue globally. These people exist all over the world. Yet, they don't have easy access to firearms. They don't have easy access to a tactical vest. That's an American problem. A preliminary review of what is believed to be the shooter's social media accounts reveal hundreds of posts that include racially or ethnically motivated violent extremist rhetoric, including neo-Nazi material and material espousing white supremacy, 2 senior law enforcement officials said. All right. Now, let's get to Greg Abbott.
Abbott has expanded gun rights. He signed open carry legislation. He's allowed for weapons to be carried on college campuses and in places of worship. He's issued executive orders bolstering and encouraging the reporting of potential threats. And in 2020, Abbott signed a law that allows Texans to carry handguns without a license or training as long as they aren't otherwise prohibited from carrying a gun.
So, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has only made it easier to acquire a firearm in a state that already has a real issue with mass shootings.
Yep.
Let me get to what Greg Abbott is saying now on Fox News Sunday, where he is responding to the popularity of gun reforms, including with Republicans. So I'm going to pause throughout this since there is a couple of things that, of course, he is lying through his teeth about, but here it is.
One state senator pointing the finger at you and the GOP there in Texas, saying there are loose and dangerous gun laws. I want to put up a poll that we just had on possible gun reforms here in the U.S. This is just out from Fox News. When you ask people what they would favor, background checks for guns, enforcing existing gun laws, legal age to 21, requiring mental health checks, flagging people for danger to self, all of those score at more than 80%. Are there things that you would consider in Texas or that you think Congress should consider at a federal level along those lines?
Well, on the federal level, as you know, some laws were passed last year to begin to address this. At the state level, listen, this is something that we've been grappling with over the past year.
I should just note that the gun laws that were passed last year were widely criticized by people that want to see proper gun reforms. So it's not anywhere close to what is necessary in order to, help stop the frequent occurrence of these sorts of events.
And there are some potential easy solutions, such as passing laws that we're working on right now to get guns out of the hands of dangerous criminals and to increase penalties for criminals who possess guns. But Shannon, we need to recognize a reality. What we've seen across the United States over the past year or two, and that is an increased number of shootings in both red states and blue states.
Which, before it goes on, that's the perfect argument for federal gun laws, to do something on a national scale as opposed to doing this state by state. If there's shootings rising across the country, then it can't just be about what individual states are doing. Yet people like Abbott always argue for states' rights.
Shannon, we've seen an increased number of shootings in states with easy gun laws as well as states with very strict gun laws. I think that the state in which the largest number of victims have occurred this year is in California, where they have very tough gun laws where 11 people died.
Okay, this is so absurd. These are the same people. Abbott, I think even in this interview, talks about how it's all getting so political. He is the one being political here by cherry picking an individual stat from 2023 as opposed to looking at the overall picture of states with terrible gun laws versus states with more restrictive gun laws, even though no state even comes close to what is necessary, because again, there needs to be national laws around this stuff. But this idea that somehow California is worse than Texas is so ridiculous and a bold-faced lie. Here is CNN with reporting a study here. States with weaker gun laws have higher rates of firearm-related homicides and suicides, study finds. So they go on to write here, a study published in January by a leading nonprofit organization that focuses on gun violence prevention found that there is a direct correlation in states with weaker gun laws and higher rates of gun deaths, including homicides, suicides, and accidental killings. The study by Everytown for Gun Safety determined that California had the strongest gun laws in the country. Hawaii topped the list with the lowest rate of gun deaths in the country, while Mississippi led the country with both the weakest gun laws and highest rate of gun deaths. There is a direct correlation here. Now, if you want to go deeper into this, you can. Here is their study. They rank all the states here. I will link to this below the video on YouTube under sources in the description box. Let's hear a little more from Abbott and where he puts the blame for these kinds of shootings.
One thing that we can observe very easily, and that is there has been a dramatic increase in the amount of anger and violence that's taking place in America. And what Texas is doing in a big-time way, we are working to address that anger and violence by going to its root cause, which is addressing the mental health problems behind it. We know that Texas had been lagging in addressing mental health for years, and that's why over the past 3 sessions, we've added almost $25 billion to address mental health. We're in the waning days of a session right now where we will be adding even more funding, about $3 billion, to address mental health needs in the state of Texas, especially in rural Texas, and especially for children in schools.
All right, so I don't know the specifics around what Texas is doing for mental health. I would be shocked if the Republican lawmakers in that state are doing anything substantial. That said, this is not the problem. Yes, fine, invest into addressing mental health, of course. Every country has mental health problems. Not every country has the mass shooting problem that America does. So to try and put the blame anywhere else, as I said at the beginning, and I'm going to get to a response here from that first responder in a minute on what Abbott said here. But to blame anything else is just incorrect and inherently political. They're the ones being political. Being like this idea that talking about gun reform is somehow it's turning, a mass shooting political. Why is the status quo not political? Why is doing nothing not seen as being political? If anything, that's being more political. Pretending an issue doesn't exist is inherently more political than actually trying to address the...
This is a uniquely American problem. There are a lot of other Western nations that get to watch the same video games, play the same video games as us, watch the same movies as us, who have done more to restrict access to military-grade weapons and do not have the type of mass shootings that we have. To blame it all on mental health is some bullshit. Because as you can see from that Parkland shooter, that motherfucker was playing up to the camera. He didn't have some sort of debilitating mental health issue. He doesn't have a problem that way. He just had hostility issues. they are categorized differently, you know. In one case, if you have a personality disorder, you can still make rational decisions. However, these shooters think that they can get away with it by trying to feign mental illness. And people like Greg Abbott are giving them the way to do that. While at the same time, I hope David covers this. How much fucking money is that bastard getting from the NRA? What the hell even? We don't need military grade weapons, and I don't care how many hogs you're trying to fight off your ranch in Texas. Give me a goddamn break. You know what? The original pioneers didn't have fucking AK-47s and AK-15s and shit. How did they survive? They certainly didn't do it with military grade weapons. Give me a goddamn break. Are you trying to say that the pioneers who came into America, set up all these ranches, that they somehow were at much more risk of getting attacked by hogs? You guys are so fucking stupid. You think we're gonna buy that argument? Fuck's sake. Go inside your house and lock the door. They can't even they can't bulldoze a door. Give me a break.
Problem. Because in that case, you're actually just playing politics. You're just playing sides as opposed to looking at what the problem.
Literally call animal control. Call animal control if you have hogs in your fucking neighbor. You guys are so crazy. You're so crazy. But you're not crazy because you're making decisions based on your hostility. And you're deciding to play crazy, right? So that you think you're going to get out of severe consequences. But what will happen is you'll be institutionalized. And it's going to be a much more severe consequence for you than just serving the sentence for the bullshit you did to other people.
In society are and trying to do anything real to address them. Now, let me get to a response here from Stephen Spainhauer and what he thinks about Abbott's excuse.
Okay. We used to have an assault weapons ban nationally. We can do that at the state level. We can put red flag laws in place. We can limit high capacity rounds. Like I found a live round next to one of the deceased victims. We can stop putting some of these weapons like M4s and AR-15s in the hands of people who don't need them. And I hear our governor talking about mental health issues. We're always going to have mental health issues, but if we don't do something about the guns, the people killing guns, then we're going to continue to have the same thing happen. It could happen to your family. It could happen to anybody that's watching in any state, in any small town or big city. And until we take some definite actions, we're changing the narrative about it being just a mental health issue and start doing something about the guns.
There you go. Mm. It's not a mental health problem.
No,
this is a gun problem. Because if it was a mental health problem, then every single country in the world would be having the same problem with guns. And they're not.
Nope.
These stories, man, are so, I don't know, just very frustrating. They're frustrating, they're depressing, because how many times have I done a video on this stuff? How many explanations have I done? How many times have I broken down what Canada does in terms of gun laws? The restrictions, you can still own a gun in Canada, but there's a process. You have to register, there's a proper background check, there's a 30-day waiting period, they talk to your partner, past partners, they do proper checks, they ensure you're actually, there's training. Like, there's just some basic laws. You could still own a gun in America with those sorts of laws, but it would ensure that these firearms don't get into the hands of the wrong people on such a consistent basis that we are talking about a story like this every single week.
Okay, let's pause that and I'll go back to the other video.
No.
His next calculated charade is one of self-harm. He first bites himself without drawing blood, or leaving any marks that were visible in his jail intake photographs. He then scratches and squeezes at the 2 needle punctures in his arm from where his blood was taken at the hospital. At the very moment the detective re-enters the room, he will act as if he's desperately trying to conceal his self-injurious behavior.
All right.
Setting aside the glaring contradiction that he just murdered and maimed dozens of people while leaving himself without so much as a scratch, it's the frequency of these little charades that makes their deception so transparent. This is a person who is not self-injurious, pretending to be someone that is. But it's such a feeble attempt at feigned self-harm, it would almost be a comical moment if the circumstances weren't as horrific.
Well, if they're not bleeding anymore, you want them off. We can pull them off. I'll get you a garbage can. You want them off? Just put them on the throw them on the floor in the corner. All right, this one is mine, because I already opened it. This one's yours in case you change your mind.
The next 4 minutes are the extremely tedious process of getting the subject to engage further through basic questions.
Okay, I'm not going to cover the whole video because I'm already at 50 minutes and I got to clip this. But point being, you Republican motherfuckers, you want everybody dead. You're taking money from the NRA and you're trying to blame this on mental health when we clearly have video that shows that that is not what's happening here. Yes, there are certain cases of mental health issues, but that is not usually the circumstance. And the fact that you're trying to make this a political argument rather than fucking protect society, you're just taking money from the NRA. You guys are assholes.